James Naughtie. I work for the BBC and write, and I've lived in London really since the late 1970s, but I am a Scot. I'm Scottish, there's no doubt about that. It's my home. I live half the time in Edinburgh, so it's physically my home again, as it once was when I was growing up. But I'm also British, and I'm one of these people who has never felt any difficulty with that. That's not a statement of intent or feeling about the referendum. It's simply a fact that I've grown up with, if you like, a dual identity, maybe a triple identity, European, although I think that's a rather vaguer concept, which I don't think most people have in any way in their heads except in the most remote fashion. So I'm a Scot and a Brit. I think the issue of whether it is going to be a vote from the head or the heart is going to be one of the themes of the campaign. It's obviously not a clear distinction, they overlap, but there is a fundamental question here, which I think we'll explore over the course of the next year, and it's this. Is the most important thing, the driver of this vote, the, if you like, the holy grail at the end of it, the sense of a Scotland which would be different and therefore more desirable, even, for example, if it were poorer, wielding less influence beyond its borders? Or is it a vote that comes down in the end to a calculation of self-interest? Is it worth the bother? Is it too expensive? What's going to happen to my pensions? I'm worried about this. I don't want Granny to have to buy a passport to go and see the kids in Essex, that kind of thing. And I think it is possible to look at two different approaches. I think there are some people who take a cultural path towards this vote, if you like. Some on the left, some in the centre, who will say, I want a different kind of Scotland that represents values that are distinct. And I think they will say, these aren't values that are necessarily represented in the way I would like by the British state. And I think there's quite a big constituency that starts from that point of view. There's another constituency, and the polls tell us it's a bigger one at the moment, by quite a bit, but we'll see what happens. Another constituency that says, look, I'm going to decide whether it is worth pulling all this apart and putting it together again, very expensively, which it's bound to be, with all the implications for, defence, pensions, where you draw the line through the North Sea, all the rest of it. And I'm doing it on the basis of a calculation of economic benefits, which is bound to be provisional and, inaccurate in the sense that no one will know 15 years' time. And add to that, I think they would say on that side of the argument, the understanding, which the Better Together campaign will press very hard in the campaign, the understanding that once you vote for independence, that's it. There's no way back. You've done it. And if it turns out that it's going to be more expensive than you thought or it doesn't work, well, that's tough. Now, I think those are two very clear positions which are starting points for substantial numbers of people. A sort of cultural desire to recreate a different Scotland, and a sceptical, but not necessarily unconvinced, but a sceptical view that says, I'm going to decide whether I will be better off, materially largely, as a consequence of this, and that will decide my vote. And, clearly there are other people who know they're going to vote yes, know they're going to vote no before they start, but there are those two camps, and I think that's going to be an interesting aspect of the sort of geography of the campaign. I think there is a question of boredom, which is bound to arise. It's funny, because people seem to say two things. I'm bored of all this stuff. And then in the next sentence they say, why can't we have more facts about what would happen if we voted yes or voted no? So there's a duality. There's nothing new about that. I mean, I've never known an election where, 10 days before, people haven't, been going around saying, tell me when it's over, I don't want to know. The truth is, this will grip people fundamentally in the course of the next year. It's bound to, because it's going to be about their future and their children's future and the kind of society in which they live. So I think it will become a big debate. My main hope is that it doesn't become an ugly debate where there are accusations of treachery one way or another being chucked across, because I think if that happened, it would be, well, I think it would be a blot on our political landscape. I think Alex Salmond knows this very well, I think it would be very unhelpful to the yes vote, but it may be something that he would be unable to stop some people getting involved in. I just hope there's not too much of it, and I think people should deprecate it if it happens. I'm going to get stuck into the referendum like everybody else, with feelings about it, of course, private feelings. Nobody will have the faintest idea how I'm going to vote. But the fact that I'm a Scot gives me the energy, the commitment, and, to a great degree, the passion about it, because it's very, very important. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. It would only be a bad thing if I let it be known or behaved in a way that made it obvious how I was going to vote. I will be as straight as I can. And I think if you don't feel enthusiastic and excited by a story like this, you shouldn't be in the business, and I still want to be in the business.